Hey, thanks so much for hanging with us on Real Talk. Again, Pastor Joe, we're doing this little mini-series. We're talking about things like anxiety and loneliness and depression and mental illness, and we want to hear from the people, right? We want to hear from you. We want to hear your questions because in a few weeks, we're going to do sort of a question and response to those questions. And so let us know. Comment on YouTube. You can send us an email. You can comment on Instagram. You could probably fax us. I don't know if we have a fax machine or whatever, but snail mail. I don't know. Get us your questions so that we can answer them. Joe, how are you?
Well, I'm doing just dandy.
Great.
On a scale of 1 to 10?
Yeah, give it to me.
3.5.
Okay. How do we push it up a notch?
Maybe a latte and a crumpet.
Okay. You don't strike me as a crumpet guy, but that's
Maybe
fine.
tea and a crumpet would be a little. That would just notch it up to 5, maybe.
Good. So I was thinking about how, literally probably hundreds of times a week, someone asks me or I ask someone, how are you? And we just go,
I'm fine.
right? It's really more part of the hi, hello than it really is a meaningful question, right?
Part of the greeting system.
Yeah.
Because I don't really want you to know how I really am.
And are you really asking a person every time how they are? Like you want to hear?
I don't care.
Right.
Really.
You're just being nice.
For most people.
Yeah, you're being nice.
Yeah.
What if we were honest? Like, what if someone said, how are you doing? And you just let it rip.
That would be really interesting. That would be interesting. I just don't think it could ever happen because
No.
I don't really want you to know how I'm doing. Right. Most people, and
Right.
good, bad, or otherwise, I don't really want you to know. So,
Right.
But if we were honest, the day would be really long.
It would be long.
We'd be listening to people's gripes and moans and joys and sorrows, and that wouldn't be fun.
So there's a lot of scripture in the Bible where there's a lot of...
Yes, there is.
There's a
Brad.
section of scripture in the Bible.
You are the teaching pastor, and of course, there is a lot of scripture in the Bible.
There is a section of scripture in the Bible we call the Psalms. And the Psalms are really an answer to the question, how are you, in a lot of ways, right? Because King David is writing these things, and it's the Bible, and so we hold it up on this pedestal, but in a lot of ways, it's just a dude's journal about how he's feeling and what's going on in his mind and his heart, right? So in a lot of ways, he's just answering the question in that moment, how are you? And so I want to read parts of one of those Psalms, Psalm 88, and then we'll kind of respond to it. So just a few verses from Psalm 88. David writes, I am overwhelmed with troubles. My life draws near to death. I'm like one without strength. You have put me in the lowest pit, in the darkest depths. I am confined. I cannot escape. I call to you, Lord, every day. I spread out my hands to you. I cry to you for help. In the morning, my prayer comes before you. Lord, why do you reject me and hide your face from me? Darkness is my closest friend. Whoa. That's heavy.
Right.
It's like sad to read too, right? It's a burden.
It's more than David's having a bad day.
It's not a bad day.
This is like really deep and dark.
It seems
like it.
Sounds like depression to me.
Yeah, we call it depression probably.
Yeah, so let's talk about depression for a few minutes.
Mm-hmm. I look at depression and I think the best way to describe it is sort of as you're living on this line, this sort of plane, and a depression is literally a little blip.
Okay.
And then you get back up on your plane and you keep going. But the deeper that depression is, if it's really deep, the deeper it is, the darker it is, and the more despair that we feel, and it can just feel horrible. And it sounds like David's not a little dip.
Yeah.
He's in a deep
darkness
hole.
is what surrounds me. Yeah. And he says, I cannot escape.
He can't feel or sense God. It's like God is so distant from him that he's journaling this day out and going, this is a deep, dark hole. Where are you, God?
And it sounds like the way people describe depression. Yeah. I can't get out of this. I don't want to be here. I can't get out of this. I'm surrounded by darkness. I feel confined. I almost feel like I've been completely abandoned by everything and I might as well die.
Yep.
Which is kind of what he's saying, right?
Super sad.
It is sad. So one of the things that strikes me about depression is how it's not just a mental thing or an emotional thing. it's physical, it's spiritual, it's all of this. Like, how do we explain that?
Yeah, and certainly like every other part of our lives, anxiety or depression, because we're so composite, made up of physical, spiritual, mental, emotional, relational, all interacting together, and having to realize like this is a disease.
Yeah,
this is something that's not just a spiritual issue or an emotional issue. It could be really at times something that needs to be dealt with. Right?
Yeah. And I think we would say that, like we said about anxiety, we would want to get in front of depression and say, hey, depression is a disease, and medical treatment is something that God has given us to deal with it. It's not a weakness.
Yes.
If we're struggling with depression, it's not read another Bible verse, pray more. It's a disease, and seek help. Medical help, counseling, whatever that is, go and talk to your doctor and get some help, and let her or him guide what you need for treatment. And yes, it's a spiritual thing, but there is another component, and God gives us medicine on purpose.
Yes. And it all is just maybe having to do with how deep you are in it.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Right? That's so it's like bad day could be a little dip, really bad week could be a little deeper, but weeks and months go by, there could be something clinically wrong, and we got to face that. And having a right Bible verse isn't going to help it. Like telling David when he feels the way he feels in this deep, dark hole, like, David, just get over it. Trust in God more. Like, he is trusting in God.
Right.
He's calling out to God.
Yes.
And yet at the same time, he could have been in a season that was really bigger than just, okay, pray it away or think a Bible verse is going to make it better. No, he's in something really deep and dark, and he has to be honest about that depth of darkness in order to find hope and healing.
Right. So as you've encountered depression either in your own life or talking with people, like what is some encouragement that you give?
I mean, I love Psalm 23. It's sort of very famous, where it says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. And David's calling out to his good shepherd at a different stage in his life and saying, you're going to walk with me, but I need to, even when I'm in my deepest, darkest moments, I don't want to take a nap in darkness. I don't want to just wallow in darkness. What does it look like for me and you to walk through darkness, realizing there's times I feel like it's horrible, but I have to move. I got to keep moving. I can't just stay and take a nap and settle into the darkness. No, I want to walk with God out of it. He's going to lead me out, and I'm going to go with him out of the darkness.
Right. And depression, one of the things depression does is it lies to us, and it tells us things like, no one's ever really felt this way before. This is unique to me, or this is worse than anyone has ever experienced it. Or even it lies to us and says, well, if I call out to God, like, that's just me doubting God. That's me saying, God, you're not enough, and I'm still kind of feeling broken and dark. It lies to us that way. And so we have to call it out to someone that can help us, or to God, like David is doing here, right?
Yeah, to God and to others, because when you're in that deep, dark hole, depending on how deep and dark, you feel like you're alone.
Yeah.
You feel the absence of light, and with the absence of light is the absence of feeling loved and cared about. And so, how do you bring this darkness out to people that you know care about you? And God cares about you, and so you bring that and be honest with him about that, and that's the pathway out.
Yeah. I think, too, just remembering that what I'm feeling is not always true, right? And so there's some great truth in the Bible that we can hold on to, but we have to choose to hold on to it. So like Psalm 16 is one to me where David writes, you will not forsake me. You will not abandon me. Sometimes it feels like we've been abandoned. And so we have to choose, which is really hard, we have to choose to believe that what we feel isn't always the truth.
Yeah, really important. And maybe even the other piece of knowing yourself and knowing personality types, and knowing that some people have personality types that are much more like Eeyore from
Winnie the Pooh,
where he's just more melancholic, a little bit more personality type that's a little bit more staid, a little bit more, and that personality type may tend towards depression, a little bit easier. Or I think of seasonal depression. That's a very real thing with people.
Yep.
Man, you're in the winter and it's dark, the sun's down, and it's like cold. And people have very real experiences with seasonal depression. And if you don't know that about yourself, then it's hard to correct it. And just praying away seasonal depression or praying away the melancholy of your personality isn't going to work. So how do you know yourself in advance so that when depression comes, you know if it's a blip or a little bit of a hole or a ditch?
Yep.
You have to know yourself enough to know, okay, that's going to change how I get myself, and with the Lord's help, out.
Which God-given resource do I need to tap into?
That's a great way of looking at it.
Right? Because they're all God-given resources, whether it's truth from Scripture or it's seeking medical help.
Or getting a suntan.
Yeah, getting some light.
Go to a tanning bed.
There you go.
All right.
We want to hear from you. We want to hear your questions, and we're going to do our best to answer them. Thanks for hanging out with us here on Real Talk.